Elias woke each morning before the sun, not because he needed to, but because sleep no longer welcomed him the way it once had. Dawn crept through the thin curtains of his small house like an uninvited guest, lighting up dust in the air and the quiet regret that lived in every corner. The town around him moved slowly, old streets, faded signs, familiar faces that nodded but never asked how he was doing. And Elias liked it that way. Silence required no explanations. He lived a disciplined life on the surface, the same walk, the same coffee mug, the same bench by the river where he sat every evening, watching the water move forward while he stayed still. To anyone looking in, he seemed calm, composed, even strong. But inside, he was frozen at the exact moment everything went wrong. Failure had a name, a date, a memory that replayed without mercy. It followed him into every room, whispered during every quiet moment. It told him he had wasted his potential, that courage had abandoned him when it mattered most, that discipline, the thing he once trusted above all else, had not saved him. Elias believed something deeply, that who you were at your worst was who you truly were, and because of that belief, he stopped reaching, stopped dreaming, stopped forgiving himself. His life became smaller not because the world demanded it, but because he decided he no longer deserved more. Sometimes, standing by the river, he would watch leaves drift downstream and feel a strange resentment toward them. They didn't hesitate. They didn't look back. They simply let go and trusted the journey. Elias wanted peace, but he believed peace was something you earned, and he was certain he had failed the test. So he carried yesterday like a heavy coat in summer, convinced that setting it down would mean denying what happened, admitting weakness, losing the last piece of identity he still recognized. What Elias didn't yet understand was this: holding on was costing him far more than letting go ever would. And the journey that would change him forever had already begun, quietly, patiently, waiting for him to notice. Before the silence, before the wait, there was a different version of Elias, one who believed in mornings, not just endured them. Back then, his days began with intention. He rose early because he wanted to, because discipline felt like devotion. Each small action was a promise kept, each completed task a quiet affirmation that he was becoming someone worthy of his own respect. He worked with focus that bordered on reverence. While others searched for shortcuts, Elias trusted the long road. He believed motivation was fleeting, but discipline was loyal. And for a time, it rewarded him. Opportunities opened, people noticed, his name carried weight. Success didn't arrive loudly, it grew steadily, like a tree that no one questions until it casts shade. With every achievement, his confidence deepened. He stood taller, spoke with certainty. He began to believe that control was the same as strength, that preparation could shield him from loss. Failure, he thought, was something that happened to careless people, to those who didn't try hard enough. And the world seemed to agree. Praise followed him, expectations rose. Elias became known not just for what he did, but for who he appeared to be: reliable, disciplined, unbreakable. He wore that image carefully, like armor polished daily. But pride is subtle. It doesn't announce itself, it disguises itself as certainty. Elias stopped listening as deeply, stopped questioning as often. He trusted his own judgment above all else, believing that the journey was predictable if you worked hard enough. There were moments, brief, almost invisible, when doubt knocked quietly, a choice that deserved more patience, a warning that asked for humility. But Elias was moving too fast, fueled by momentum and applause. He told himself this was confidence, that hesitation was weakness. Looking back, the rise was not the mistake. The effort was honest, the work was real. But somewhere along the way, Elias tied his entire sense of worth to staying on top. He didn't just want success, he needed it, because without it, he wasn't sure who he would be. And when your identity is built only on winning, the fall doesn't just take your achievements, it takes your footing, it takes your voice, It takes the ground beneath everything you thought was solid. The fall did not come with warning bells or dramatic music. It arrived quietly, disguised as confidence. One decision, made too quickly, defended too stubbornly, cracked the foundation Elias believed was unbreakable. He didn't see it at first. Most collapses don't announce themselves, they whisper. At first, it was a delay, then a complication, then a question he couldn't answer without feeling something shift inside his chest. The room that once welcomed his voice grew colder, conversations shortened, trust thinned, and then, in a moment that would replay itself for years, the truth stood exposed. He had misjudged, miscalculated, missed something essential. Failure, real failure, has a sound. For Elias, it sounded like silence after words that couldn't be taken back, like the pause before disappointment settles in a room, like his own breath catching as he realized this wasn't something effort could undo. What followed was swift and merciless. Opportunities vanished, respect eroded, the image he had protected so carefully shattered in public view. People spoke differently around him now, carefully, cautiously, as if he were fragile glass. And perhaps he was. But the deepest damage wasn't external. It was the voice inside him that changed tone. It told him he had proven his worst fear true, that discipline had limits, that courage had failed him, that the man he believed himself to be was a story that ended here. Shame has weight. Elias carried it everywhere. It bent his posture, clouded his thoughts, turned memories into accusations. He replayed every step that led to the fall, searching for a version where he could have stopped it. But time does not negotiate. He withdrew quietly, no dramatic exit, just distance, less conversation, less presence, less hope. The world continued moving, but Elias felt left behind, standing in the wreckage of who he used to be. That night, alone in the dark, he understood something terrifying. Failure didn't just take what he built, it took who he thought he was allowed to be. And in the silence that followed, he made a promise, not to rise again, but never to risk falling like that again. A promise that would cost him far more than the failure ever did. Elias told himself he had accepted what happened. He said it calmly, almost convincingly, but acceptance is quiet movement forward, and Elias had not moved at all. His days became repetitions, carefully controlled, stripped of anything that could surprise him. Change felt dangerous now. Hope felt reckless. He lived surrounded by reminders he refused to touch. Old notebooks stayed unopened. Achievements stayed framed but never looked at directly. He avoided places where his past self still existed, as if proximity alone might reopen the wound. Yet every night, alone with his thoughts, he returned there anyway. Denial doesn't always look like refusal. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Elias convinced himself that carrying guilt was responsible, that letting go would mean erasing the lesson. He believed pain was proof of accountability, so he held on to it tightly, even as it hollowed him out. He replayed the failure endlessly, editing conversations that could no longer be changed. In his mind, he stood at every crossroads again, choosing differently, winning this time. But when morning came, nothing had shifted. The past remained untouched, and the present remained stalled. People reached out at first. Invitations, conversations, quiet concern. Elias declined, gently, always politely. He told himself he was protecting others from disappointment. In truth, he was protecting himself from reflection. Because to move forward meant facing the terrifying possibility that he was still allowed to try. The town around him changed with the seasons, but Elias did not. Leaves fell, snow melted, new faces appeared. And still he carried yesterday like a sacred burden. He believed this was strength, staying loyal to the memory of failure. He believed forgetting would mean becoming careless again. But denial is not strength. It is fear wearing discipline's mask. Late one evening, standing by the river, Elias watched the water crash against a fallen branch, trapped between rocks. The current pushed relentlessly, but the branch refused to move, spinning in place.
He felt an unsettling recognition. For the first time, a question slipped past his defenses. What if holding on wasn't honoring the past, but punishing the present? The thought frightened him, so he pushed it away, returned home, closed the door. Yet something had shifted. The silence felt heavier now, not protective. Denial was no longer keeping him safe. It was keeping him stuck. The encounter happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind Elias usually let pass unnoticed. The sky was overcast, the air still. He sat on his usual bench by the river, watching the water with practiced detachment, when he noticed someone else there, an old man, feeding crumbs to birds that didn't seem particularly interested.
They sat in silence for a while. Elias appreciated that. Most people filled quiet spaces too quickly. Eventually, the old man spoke, not looking at him. "You've been coming here a long time," he said gently. Elias stiffened. "Long enough." The old man nodded, as if that answered everything. "I used to come here too," he continued, "back when I was trying to remember who I used to be." That caught Elias's attention. He glanced over, surprised by the familiarity in the words. The man's face was lined but peaceful, not untouched by life, just no longer at war with it. "What happened?" Elias asked, before he could stop himself. The old man smiled faintly. "I failed at something that mattered. Thought carrying it forever would make me honest." Elias felt something tighten in his chest. "Did it?" "No," the old man said softly. "It just made me tired." They watched the river together. The birds fluttered away. The moment stretched, unforced. "Why do you keep coming back?" the old man asked. Elias opened his mouth, ready with explanations, discipline, routine, reflection, but none of them felt true. He hesitated. "I don't know how to leave," he admitted. The old man turned to him then, eyes steady but kind. "Leaving isn't forgetting, it's choosing what you carry forward." The words landed quietly, without instruction or urgency. The man stood, brushing crumbs from his hands. "You can honor what happened," he added, "without living there." And just like that, he walked away, disappearing into the slow-moving street, leaving Elias alone with a truth that felt uncomfortably close to hope. For the first time in years, Elias didn't replay the past that night. He replayed a sentence. And in the silence, something loosened. Not fully, not yet, but enough for light to find a crack. Change did not arrive as a revelation. It arrived as permission. Elias didn't wake up transformed the next morning. The weight was still there. The memories still knew his name. But something subtle had shifted, a loosening, like a knot that had finally been acknowledged. For the first time, he didn't rush to silence his thoughts. He let them speak, without judgment, without defense. He began with small acts that felt almost insignificant. He took a different route on his morning walk, sat on a different bench, opened one of the old notebooks he had avoided for years. The pages smelled of dust and ambition. Instead of closing it, he stayed. He read. And when regret surfaced, he didn't push it away. He breathed through it. Healing, he realized, was not about erasing pain. It was about allowing it to exist without control. Elias started to forgive himself in pieces, not all at once, that felt dishonest, but moment by moment. He stopped rehearsing alternate endings to the past, stopped asking who he would be if he had never failed. Instead, he asked a gentler question: who am I becoming now? There were days when the old voice returned, sharp and convincing, days when shame felt heavier than progress. On those days, Elias practiced something new: patience. He reminded himself that discipline was not punishment, it was care. Strength was not endurance alone, it was compassion applied consistently. He spoke to people again, not about success, not about the fall, just about weather, books, ordinary things. And slowly he remembered that connection didn't require perfection. Presence was enough. One evening by the river, Elias watched a branch finally break free from the rocks, carried forward by the current. He didn't feel triumph, he felt relief. Rebirth, he learned, is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It simply begins when you stop fighting who you were and start walking with who you are. The world did not change when Elias did. The town remained familiar. The river followed the same path. Mornings still arrived quietly. But Elias now met them differently, not as tests to survive, but as moments to inhabit. He carried his past more lightly now, not because it mattered less, but because it no longer demanded to lead. Failure had become a chapter, not a title, a teacher, not a sentence. And in that shift, Elias found something he hadn't felt in years: balance. Purpose returned, but it wore a different shape. It was no longer tied to proving anything, no longer fueled by fear of falling. Elias worked again, carefully, honestly, but without the armor. He listened more, asked questions, accepted that uncertainty was not an enemy, but part of the journey. There was courage in that acceptance, a quieter courage than before, but stronger. It allowed him to take risks without tying his worth to the outcome, to move forward without needing guarantees, to trust that discipline could coexist with grace. Some evenings he still sat by the river, not to escape, but to reflect. He noticed how the water didn't resist obstacles. It adapted, flowed around them, through them, always moving, never apologizing for what it left behind. Elias smiled more now, not the wide, performative kind, but the kind that settles into the eyes. People noticed, though few could say exactly what had changed. He was steadier, present, at peace. He no longer measured life by milestones alone. He measured it by alignment, how honestly he lived, how gently he treated himself, how open he remained to becoming. The past still existed, it always would, but it no longer stood in the doorway of every tomorrow. Elias had learned something essential. You don't move forward by outrunning yesterday. You move forward by setting it down and choosing again and again to walk unburdened into the next morning. And in that choice, repeated daily, he found freedom. Elias's story is not rare. It is happening quietly every day in the lives of people who believe yesterday has already decided tomorrow. So let this story rest with you, not as entertainment, but as a mirror. Because somewhere in your own journey, you may be carrying something that no longer belongs in your hands. Here are the lessons Elias learned, gently, painfully, honestly. Failure is not your identity. It is an experience, not a definition. Discipline without compassion becomes a cage. True strength includes kindness towards yourself. Letting go is not forgetting. It is choosing not to bleed from a wound that has already taught you. Courage is quieter than you think. Sometimes it looks like trying again without applause. Healing is not dramatic. It happens in small, patient steps taken consistently. Your past deserves respect, not control. Learn from it, then release it. Purpose is not found in proving worth. It is found in living honestly and fully right now. If you are standing where Elias once stood, tired, guarded, afraid to move forward, hear this clearly. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are simply being asked to put something down. So take a breath, loosen your grip, and take the next step, not as the person you were, but as the person you are becoming. If this story gave you even a moment of clarity, share it with someone who needs it. And if you're walking this journey too, stay connected, because you don't have to carry it alone. Tomorrow is waiting, and it weighs far less than yesterday.